Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai. I'm here today with Joe, and we are talking about inclusive leadership, something that we are hearing a lot about, seeing a lot in the media around one of the most important leadership capabilities we need to embrace in this changing world and for the future of work. And we thought it might be useful to have a bit of a corridor about what does it look like? What is it? Why is it important? What are some of the challenges that we might experience in this leadership growth and future-proofing ourselves in this space? Kia ora, Joe.
Kia ora, Jess. Nice to be with you. Ka tēnā koutou katoa, everyone. Yeah, inclusive leadership. It's going to be a great discussion. And as you said, Jess, lots of kōrero around organizations at the moment around inclusive leadership being a really, really important capability for the future of work. And so a lot of the discussion around why this is important links to the changing workforce that we're seeing. So demographic changes. The reality is that our workforces are going to be made up of more and more diverse people into the future. And so the challenge from a leadership perspective is how do we create capability amongst our leaders to create environments where everyone's perspective can be sought out. Not only I think the sought out bit is really important. Sometimes we talk about perspectives are valued, but actually seeking out diverse perspectives in our decision making, irrespective of identity, irrespective of background, irrespective of hierarchy within the organization, is going to be critical for organizations to be able to navigate this really challenging future that we face into, which is being driven by a whole lot of economic challenges, demographic challenges, business model changes, environmental impacts, all of those things. And so, yeah, it's really coming to the fore quite quickly for organizations that inclusive leadership is a critical capability for the future of work and the current time that we're leading through as well.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting shift because I know for you and I, we've both been leaders and we've both been involved in this work for many years. And I guess over that time period, we've seen that change significantly. And for me, leadership was always all about people's technical skills and ability. And the more qualifications you had, the more experience you had, the more likely you were to climb that ladder. And that's shifted somewhat. And we're looking at these new capability sets that, for a lot of leaders, particularly if they've been in their role a long time, is something that is different and new. And of course, leading multi-demographic workforces this is a change. This is something we've never had to do to the extent that we do it now. And our teams often look and sound a lot different to us. And that presents its own challenges, right? And yet, we are also seeing that in order to get the best out of our business and our team and the organizational cultures we build, if everybody did look and sound like us, we wouldn't reach the goals that we have set.
No,
Businesses wouldn't be sustainable, right? So I guess what, in your view, what are some of the challenges in this space? Because I think we should talk about what inclusive leadership looks like, but I think it's also important to talk about what gets in the way, because quite often it's easier for us, particularly as leaders who are established in their roles, who have power and influence, to just carry on doing what we've always done because it's easy, it's what we know, it's familiar, it's safe, and yet we're missing out on this huge future capability that we're going to need and therefore risk getting left behind.
totally. I love this. I think it's really important to acknowledge that leading inclusively with diverse teams is hard. It's harder than leading homogeneously or leading in a group think environment. Because in a group think environment where you're recruiting for culture fit, and you have all of the bias that sits in and around that, around surrounding yourself with people that look and feel like you with similar education backgrounds, similar ethnicities and cultures, similar gender identities to you. It's easy because they like all your good ideas. Like it's quite a nice time for, everyone likes your ideas, everyone knows and laughs at your jokes. You can deliver stuff quite quickly because there isn't much friction that happens in that environment. There isn't a lot of challenge. You can actually deliver stuff quite through the line if it's a project delivery or whatever it is that you're working on without a lot of friction. And so, you can do it quite quickly. The challenge around leading inclusively with diverse perspectives is that there will be friction. You actually seek out challenge. You're asking for people to challenge the status quo, to feel safe to ask the question, I don't know if this is the right answer. And so you have to work through that really patiently. It means that it might take you longer. You might have to regroup and rework and iterate those ideas. But when that happens, this is the realization of the diversity, equity, and inclusion business case. When you have diverse perspectives around the table, coupled with a culture of psychological safety, that's when you see the innovation, the productivity increase, the engagement, staff engagement, and well-being levels increase. The discretionary effort and the bottom line profit outcomes. But those two need to be working in unison and dovetailing together. The perspectives are around the table, and the culture is there for them to feel safe. But to your point before, Jess, it's harder. So we need to acknowledge that, and I think we need to adjust some of our working models to appreciate this as well. Like we're working at such pace in our organization, particularly in a post-pandemic era or a tail end of the pandemic era where we were used to sprinting, um, that we're not allowing enough space for the friction and the reworking and the iteration that is required within really effective inclusive leadership and diverse leadership to allow for that. And so I think it requires a culture shift and a bit of a system shift for us to be able to have the patience and the energy and the time to lead like this, which is different to how fast can we make the boat go? So how can we surround ourselves with a fit of people which will allow that to happen without any friction?
Yeah, and I think that's such a good point because we have always focused on how fast can we make the boat go, but quite often the boat is not going in the right direction, right?
Exactly.
Like this is this whole piece around, and we talk about this in the Mobilize program when we're teaching inclusive leadership and allyship around belonging isn't something people can do by themselves. As an underrepresented group, we cannot show up and say, right, today I'm going to choose to belong and bring my best.
Yeah.
That's more around the environment that's created for us, right? And that culture. And of course, our leaders set that culture. And I think that what we're seeing now is when we're hiring and we're looking for best fit for the role, you're right. Best fit for the role is not someone that looks and sounds like me, but my human instincts will seek similarity and where I'm comfortable, right? So the people that laugh at my jokes and went to the similar schools to me and grew up in the similar towns to me and all of that stuff. And yet, when we reverse that, when we start to get a diverse mix of people around us and our teams don't all look and sound like us, they're more representative of the world around us, and therefore they're more representative of our client base and our customers. So that innovation piece and the direction the boat is heading is so much more aligned in terms of our bottom line objectives, the ROI, all of the stuff that we have in our KPIs and the stuff that we don't always link back to because it's harder, that diverse mix of people that we want to surround ourselves with and have in our team. And it's easier said than done, right? And I think this is some of the traits of an inclusive leader where we will embrace this stuff even though it's hard. Um, let's talk about some of the other traits of inclusive leadership because I think it's really important to understand what does this look and sound like? What are some of the skills that inclusive leaders have, and where are some of the capability gaps potentially that leaders may need to focus on in terms of embracing what inclusive leadership is?
Yeah, so and the London School of Economics have just done some really cool work on this, called the inclusive individual. So we might link some of that work into the post and encourage you to have a look at this because they've done some scaled research on what are some of those traits, and they're really lining up to how we're teaching within the Mobilize program as well. And so they talk about inclusive leaders have a diverse network within their organization. So they have a network in the workplace that is diverse. They seek out challenge from those that have a different perspective. A really good question I reckon, to test this is to ask your colleagues, when was the last time that they changed their mind about something big based on an argument or a perspective of another colleague in that meeting or in the room or in your team. That's quite a good test of are you willing to surround yourself with different perspectives, and are you open enough to change your mind on something which you had quite a potentially a fixed view on in terms of whether that was a strategic direction or whatever it was within an organization. So a diverse network is so important and a really clear trait of an inclusive leader. The other one is about giving voice to others. So inclusive leaders pay attention to whether colleagues have a voice in a situation. So they pave the way for excluded colleagues to speak up and contribute and create an environment for that to play out. They speak up in a meeting and highlight that they would like to hear from a colleague who they expected to speak but may not be speaking up. They also speak up when someone is interrupted to allow them to continue. And by doing that, it draws attention to those that are excluding those voices which maybe not coming to the fore. To that point again, inclusive leaders do intervene. They intervene when an individual or a group is being excluded or isolated in the workplace. And they don't act as a bystander when someone is excluded or isolated. Inclusive leaders are welcoming of all colleagues. They pay particular attention to those who may have weaker networks in the organization or those that may be excluded. And we think that this is all underpinned by the three questions that we're framing our Mobilize program around core YO. Who am I? Understanding what have been the critical people and moments and journey in your life that have formed your perspective on the world and understanding why that is and how that's been formed. Core why queer, how do you understand how other people are having a different experience to you? So creating an openness for you to change your mind to be open to other people's perspectives. And then critically core why tato, how are we all going to be together? How do we really unite organizations, teams with diverse perspectives and create environments for them to really thrive and for their perspective to be sought out. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I love that foundation. And we've got some really good feedback running out the Mobilize program and using that framework. The feedback has been that it makes such a difference. It's such a great sort of, triangle to hang this off. And that foundational point, that very first know yourself, who am I, is so fundamental. And inclusive leaders, they have this self-awareness, right? They know who they are. And therefore, because they know who they are and what makes them tick, they're more able to understand who others might be and look for other experiences that are different to their own and allow for those experiences as well. I think so often in this world, we see this scarcity and threat around difference because it's something I don't know about or it's different to what I know. And it's challenging, right? It takes courage to actually say, hey, I'm not the only expert in the room. And even if I've been in my role 30 years, you might actually have a better idea than me on this particular topic.
Yeah.
And so it does take that courage. And I think that also leads to that curiosity piece, right? We talk a lot in the Mobilize program around the ability to listen, to have empathy, to be curious, to allow space for others. And that then links into that second framework. Who are you? How do I open this space for others? And I love that you talked about those interventions because that takes courage too, right?
Mm.
Again, this is another point where this is more challenging than accepting the status quo.
Yeah, and that intervening point, we get a lot of questions about this around, bystander effect and when's the right time for me to intervene, and that's not an easy question to answer. I think what we're coaching people on is finding your own voice and finding your own practice around when is the right time for you to intervene, so that it's safe for you and for the person that you're intervening on behalf of and in that environment. And so that takes, to your point, some courage, but it also takes some practice. And so we do some work in the workshops around this, like what are the times when it's appropriate to do it, and just get into the habit of doing it in your own way in terms of your intervention. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I love the I was fortunate enough as well as a decade in HR working in leadership development, I was fortunate enough to spend a decade with Buddhist monks and nuns studying. And they have this concept of the beginner's mind, which I
Mm,
love. And they talk about, you might have a master meditator who has been doing this every day for most of the day for 30 years. So clearly very good at it. And yet they'll approach each meditation as a beginner. And this beginner's mindset, the value behind that and why they have this beginner's mindset is that when you approach things as a beginner, you are more open, you are more curious, you are more ready to listen and learn. And I think that's something that we can take into this concept of inclusive leadership. Because if we don't assume we're always the expert, we are so much more open to other people's thoughts, opinions, ideas, and therefore learning. And it speaks to that curiosity piece. But I think it also links into another concept that's constantly coming up in this space, and that's the egoless leadership,
yeah.
right? And humility, leading with humility. And again, that requires us to accept that we may not be the only expert in the room. And sometimes we might take a back seat, even when we're the leader and we're used to being in the front seat. And that takes courage in itself. There's that whole concept of I'm here not to be right, but to get it right. And
Mm.
that may not just be what I think and say, it might be how I include and involve others.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I think that ego leadership links back to the core white O question. It's my observation that the leaders that are leading with ego first and need to be the loudest voice in the room, the smartest person in the room, leading with control type behaviors, are those that haven't done that work, who are not comfortable in their own skin and haven't developed what Brene Brown beautifully calls grounded confidence in themselves. And so when you have developed that grounded confidence by asking those questions, core YO, by doing the work on your own journey to understand your own perspective, you're much more comfortable not having to be that person, to be more vulnerable to and also to say, I don't know the answer, even if you're in a senior leadership position to your team, say, hey, we need to work this out together because I don't have all the answers here, which is often the case. And we feel as leaders like we always need to have these really smart responses and smart answers to every difficult question. And the problems that we're looking to solve now in this complex environment are different problems than we've ever had to solve for before. And so this emphasizes this capability even more, that we can't rely on just these kind of single point sensitive, ego driven, control based leaders to solve the problems that we're coming up against now, because they're not equipped to do that. It's going to take a whole lot of different perspectives, different backgrounds and lived experiences around the table to face some of the challenges. Like, what is the next thing that is an incomprehensible challenge to our business model, to our community that we're going to face? We've seen the pandemic, we've seen weather events, we're facing climate crisis, all of those things. We're facing massive geopolitical challenges around the world. And so these are all challenges that we haven't really faced before. And so collective leadership rather than individual based leadership, I think, is the answer. And core to that is the ability to be inclusive and bring other perspectives to the table and be comfortable enough for them to be voiced and heard and sought out.
Yeah, totally. And making sure we can bring everyone else along on that journey, right?
Mm,
Because that's key in this leadership space, particularly in times of change and uncertainty, which we're certainly in now. It's all very well a leader going off in a certain direction, but no good if nobody else is following them, right? And so
yeah.
being able to bring everybody along, and when I say everybody, that's all of the people, that even the ones you may not understand or that look and sound like you, um, is such a challenge in this current environment, and inclusive leadership is the answer or the antidote to that challenge. And I think it makes sense that the world has changed so much. It makes sense that as leaders, so will we. And so that constant evolution and continuous improvement is something that if we're not doing, we are simply at risk of getting left behind, right? Because what got us to where we are is not going to get us from there to the future, because we know that's going to be vastly different, particularly against the backdrop of the swiftness of our evolution of things like AI, and how things are going to continue to change at a exponential rate. And I think that also taps back into, when you look at our leadership development, a lot of the technical stuff that we've kind of has been the bedrock of our success as a leader is the stuff that AI will start to do for us. And the thing that will make the difference in this age of AI is our humanness, is our human skills, is how we engage others and how we bring everybody along on this journey. And that's going to lean heavily on those who have inclusive leadership capability, which is why this is so important.
Yeah, 100%. And we haven't even touched on AI until now, which is such a disruptive force in terms of the future of work. And what we're hearing as well is people's fear around their leadership relevance into the future. And we're hearing this from men in the workshops that we're running, particularly around. I got to the leadership position that I'm in because I was a really good engineer. I was a really good IT person. I was a really good accountant. I was a really good lawyer, and that's why I'm in this leadership position now. But now that technical expertise is not as valued as my ability to create an environment because I'm managing geographically dispersed teams. I'm managing multiple cultures and ethnicities in intergenerational ages, and everything, all of the complexity that brings, and really big challenges that our business are facing in terms of the economic environment or the external environment that have all of these forces kind of coming into it. And so the fear is what got me here, to your point before, Jess, like what got me here is not going to serve me well into the future. And so the participants of the program that we're running, Mobilize, are really hungry to tool up around inclusive leadership to future proof their relevance in the recruitment market and in the leadership market. So when we have the really common question, I get this a lot personally from other men. If I'm a 50-year-old white male and I get made redundant, and this is really real in the current environment. I'm living in Wellington, and the public sector is facing huge job cuts, and so it's a really competitive recruitment market at the moment. My answer to that is it's incumbent on you as a leader to ensure your leadership capability is fit for purpose for what is in demand by organizations now. And so if you've put all of your tools in the basket of technical competence, then you are at risk of being irrelevant in the future and now. If you take the opportunity to grow your leadership capability beyond your technical competence and think of examples about how you've been able to create environments where diverse teams can thrive, which has driven innovation, which has driven productivity, which has driven success within that organization, you will be in demand because that is the capability that organizations are looking for. Inclusive leaders who can bring teams together to drive high performance and innovation, not necessarily technical leaders that have a technical background coming into leadership positions. And so, that's the response. It's your responsibility. It's no one else's responsibility. The world has changed. And so you need to kind of accept that and adapt.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Those of us that are successful are the ones that can adapt to change, right?
Totally.
And I think that's for those, if this has piqued your interest, for those looking to develop some of those inclusive leadership capabilities, for those looking to build ally networks across their organization, then yes, check out the Mobilize program that Joe and I are busy running. We are loving this mahi, hey Joe, and the
We
impact
sure
that
are.
it makes. So check out the website, menasallies.co.nz, or get in touch with either of us for a chat if you would like to learn more about the work we're doing in the inclusive leadership space.
Kia ora.